Hey, it's JK. So, after much deliberation, it's finally time for a Bloodborne multi-cycle run. Here, I'll be doing a different challenge each cycle. In New Game, I will only use guns, in New Game Plus, I will only use Hunter's Tools, and in New Game Plus, it'll be Weapon Roulette, where I must only use one weapon per boss, and I spin a wheel to determine which weapon I'll use next. Bloodborne is known for having one of the toughest New Game Plus cycles of any of these games, so as you can imagine, this was a run born of pain. Let's jump right in. First, we call our character Derp the Ripper to go with the Victorian theme. What do you think this guy's weapon of choice would be? Let me know in the comments below. As this cycle is the gun run, we pick Noble Scion as our origin for the blood tinge stat it starts with. After learning someone let the Mogwai eat after midnight again, we head into Yharnam and quickly find ourselves in the Hunter's Dream. We choose Hunter's Pistol for our starting gun and start the process of grabbing bloodstone shards. We unlock shortcuts as needed and upgrade the pistol to +1. This cycle lives and dies on both vials and bullets, so we sell the saw cleaver for more echoes to buy vials. As for bullets, this enemy drops 4 bullets but only takes 2 to kill, so this is a really good way to farm ammunition. We then grab even more bloodstone shards from here, and then we unlock the shortcut elevator. We upgrade the pistol to +2 now, and level up blood tinge and vitality 1 point each. It's about time to try a boss, and Gasconveniently, Papa G is right ahead. This was actually the toughest fight I've had with him in ages. Damage was really low unless I parry, and gets even lower in beast form. I'm somewhat ashamed to say I actually died a few times here. Having really low vitality probably doesn't help, especially when he spams the lunge like this. So I went away and farmed until I had 20 vitality and 20 blood tinge, which should give us a fighting chance. The damage increase was minimal, but the extra health helped. I got actually pretty good at parrying in phase 1, but beast mode is where it all goes to hell. I struggled to parry him, but at least this time I had enough health to survive and come back. Much farther from a clean victory than I would have liked, but after enough bullets, he goes down. Next up, we get the Blood Gem Workshop and enter Cathedral Ward. We could have farmed for shards earlier, but there's more just lying around here, so it's easier to just get them. With the pistol upgraded to +3, let's give Cleric Beast a try. Honestly, it was really easy in comparison to Gascoigne despite the fact he can't be parried. He has higher health, but the damage seemed a bit better, although what really helped was the extra bullets lying in the arena. A few more shots leave this beast in a state of Clerica Mortis. With his defeat, we can now buy the Repeating Pistol. It uses 2 bullets instead of 1, but does more damage, so it seems worthwhile. We upgrade it to +1 and put a gun in each slot so we can switch between them as needed. As we tried to get to Old Yharnam, this dog was so angry that he leapt up and got stuck in the wall. Looks like he's stuck there for good. Maybe if he keeps jumping he'll come out onto the woof top. So anyhow, we get to Old Yharnam, basically just run past everything and shoot Jura off the edge. This earns us the Powder Keg Hunter badge, which may come in handy later. Next, I shoot down the chandelier on my first try. Yep, first try. We unlock the shortcut, grab some more shards, then grab even more shards, and finally upgrade the Repeating Pistol to +3. This brings us to the Blood-Starved Beast. To maximize damage but also save bullets, I parry with the Hunter's Pistol but deliver the follow-up with the Repeating Pistol for extra damage. Even doing this, the damage was still pretty low, and needless to say, this was a long fight, clocking in at nearly 10 minutes, which for the third boss on a New Game cycle is pretty crazy. This really came down to the wire as well. I had no vials left and was 1 hit from death when I delivered the final shot, causing the beast to feast as we force-fed it some lead. We now upgrade Blood Tinge to 21. This door at the start of Cathedral Ward is now open, which lets us get the Odin rune here to hold more bullets, and we can get another one this guy kindly gives to us. Sorry about that. There's also the Communion rune to hold an extra blood vial. We can't use them yet, but good to get them for later. The biggest drawback of using the guns, taking out multiple enemies at once is pretty annoying. At least there's a Blood Tinge gemstone here. We then grab the Radiant Sword Hunter badge, probably the most important badge for our build. But before I get into that, let's drop down to the abandoned workshop and get an umbilical cord. Yummy yum yums. So the Radiant Sword Hunter badge? Well, it lets us buy Ludwig's rifle, but more importantly, Bloodstone Shards and Bone Marrow Ash. Bone Marrow Ash boosts the next shot from your gun by a lot and is the most important item for gun runs. I have no idea if this weapon is any good, but we upgrade Ludwig's rifle to +3. We next gun down the Pyro Wolf and get all the shortcuts in Cathedral Ward unlocked. I think we need to do all we can to boost our damage before another boss. So we head to Hemwick Charnel Lane for twin bloodstone shards. I grab all the ones I can get and upgrade the repeating pistol to +5. We can get some more twin shards back in Cathedral Ward, including the ones down here from the scurrying beasts. Now we can upgrade the repeating pistol to +6. It would also be nice if we'd actually be able to use the runes we picked up earlier, so let's go take on the Witches of Hemwick. This is our first time testing out Bone Marrow Ash and... yeah, that is a lot more damage. This boss is of course pretty easy, so after a lot of shots, the Hemwicked Witches are defeated. This lets us get the rune workshop so we can equip all the runes we got earlier. Because there's no reason not to, we head straight to Vicar Amelia. So, if it wasn't apparent already, this fight really shows how much Bone Marrow Ash is such a difference maker. With 10 of these in hand and each one making the repeating pistol do 462 damage, that's 4,620 damage on Amelia, leaving only about 800 health of hers we need to deplete. This was actually a pretty quick fight as a result. Amelia gets vicaried off to the afterlife. Not a marrow victory at all. We now get the blood tinge to 23 before we get smacked into Yahar'gul. Here we get more twin shards here and here, as well as of course opening the shortcut door. With the last couple twin shards under our belt, we decided to fight Paarl early. Normally you wouldn't want to attempt this, but we do have a bit of an advantage, a build that lets us shoot his head. Shooting the head with a Bone Marrow Ash does big damage and instantly staggers him. Until he randomly stops staggering even when we hit the head for some reason. Not sure what happened there, but still a first try win as we slay this Paarless creature. We get blood tinge to 25 now, and speaking of blood, Master Willem pops in to say blood, 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 like it's going out of fashion. With the password in hand, we pay a visit to already dead Fred and quickly run to take the route back to Yharnam. We climb the Metal Gear ladder, open the shortcut gate, kill Eiffel 65 and get the Cainhurst summons. We grab another Better Communion rune and also get the DLC entry item. With the summons, we take a carriage to Baron's Castle. There's a couple of bloodstone chunks lying around here, but we can of course also shoot this brain-dead gargoyle for more twin shards as well. With the shortcut unlocked, we can get the real prize from this area. We jump off these stairs to get to this chest containing the Evelyn. This amazing gun is going to be our main for most of the rest of the run. We also unlock the route to Santa's Grotto, but we're not going there just yet. Instead, we grab the Blood Tinge gem and a couple more bloodstone chunks. With all we've gathered, we upgrade the Evelyn to +5 and equip all the relevant gems. We'll have the repeating pistol and Evelyn in our left-hand slots. The Evelyn does less damage than the repeating pistol but takes only 1 bullet instead of 2. We get more shards from the Forbidden Woods, but sadly experience our canonical death once again. Regardless, we get 1 more twin shard and then we upgrade the Evelyn to +7. We still grab some more twin shards for later though. You never know when you might need them. Time now to face the shadows of Yharnam. We use Bone Marrow Ash to quickly eliminate the Fireball one. With the 2 remaining, they start doing the annoying Extendo Arm Sword attack, the attack that usually spanks me the most in this fight. Luckily, we still had more Bone Marrow Ash, so taking out the Candle one is also pretty easy. The final one proved pretty annoying because he kept doing the snake attack over and over again, and as we know, the snakes have insane range. It came down to the wire, mainly due to some missed snakes by me in this final section, but after a few more shots, we finally killed the last shadow. Before proceeding, we level up Blood Tinge to 27. In Bergenworth, we get the Lunarium key to already take on yet another boss. Rom was kinda annoying. I mean, damage was good, but obviously we can't kill the little spiders without wasting a lot of bullets, and they hurt a lot. Just getting in position to shoot was hard without these spiders doing a Tobey Maguire impression and kissing me from above. But again, damage with Bone Marrow Ash was decent, and we don't compromise on our aggression, letting us take out this vacuous spider shortly after. Zelda then tells me that the blood moon rises once again, and we find ourselves back in Yahar'gul, now with added Eldritch Horror. We level up to 29 Blood Tinge, run through to get the next lamp, and start collecting all the bloodstone chunks in the area. Thank God we opened up the shortcut door for easier access. We grab a bunch of chunks here, and even more over here. With all these, we upgrade the Evelyn to +9. We then take a quick bath to clean ourselves up before this very stinky boss next. Yes indeed, it's time for the One Reborn. Overall, this was pretty easy. It takes just 2 bullets to kill the women, which we can afford to expend. It's funny, despite having a lot of arms and legs, this boss has quite limited movement. We can just about manage to shoot the controlling body, which is where you get the big damage numbers from, but being locked onto it puts you in a horrible camera situation where it can be difficult to dodge some of its attacks or even see them coming. This boss has a lot of health, so even after using all our bone marrow ash, it still has half its health bar remaining. Thankfully, we can get a bit more damage once it staggers, letting us get quite a few shots in also. Towards the end, I just started spamming, sending many bullets airborne, and thankfully it goes down. We now level up Vitality as well as Blood Tinge, as I felt like it might come in handy. After a touching reunion with Nicolas Cage, we head into the lecture building. We have a quick chat with Patches before heading into the Nightmare Frontier. Here, we encounter our first Summer Lamp. Normally these guys are pretty scary, but they're actually very susceptible to gun parries. I wasn't even really timing shots here, I just kept firing and he died pretty quickly. With the unlocking of this shortcut, it was boss time once again. So you know how Amygdala's head is a big weak point? Well, yeah, this was an absolute joke. With Bone Marrow Ash, it took only 6 shots to the head to bring her down. Kinda crazy how this run started with horrific damage, but now I feel almost overpowered. Amygdala's big brain plays couldn't save her here. After a proper cheeky upgrade to Vitality, we return to Yahar'gul to get the Upper Cathedral Ward key. We now head upper to the upper where we get some bloodstone chunks and grab the Cosmic Eye Watcher badge, which lets us buy twin bloodstone shards, something very useful for later. So how will bullets fare against the brain suckers here? Well, let's just call this guy a stun loctopus. It's the same up above, but this time I did use a bone marrow ash to kill the first quickly to make taking out the second a bit easier. Descending back down, I met this Doom Wolf who wanted a hug, but I told him it was going to cost him extra bullets, that is. Sorry about that, Doom. So that just leaves Celestial Emissary, and yeah, this guy was also very easy. The only tough part, if you want to even call it that, was the little guys getting in the way of the big guy, but that's still probably a minor annoyance at best really. Felt like Celes stealing candy from a baby. Of course, just beyond that is Ebrietas, another boss with a huge head weak point. This was pretty similar to Amygdala, but obviously Ebrietas has about twice as much health. Not that this really mattered. 3 bone marrow ash bullets were enough to stagger her, then I got off 2 more shots during her stagger. 2 further shots got her into range for the phase transition, during which I landed another 3 shots, by which point she was very almost dead. I did get caught by the lasers, but survived, and a few more shots ended it. This almost felt like a cheese, I guess you could call her Ebrietas. We now level up to 30 Vit, and go grab another umbilical cord from Yosefka before we proceed. So, I guess it's Nightmare of Mensis time. Honestly, I just kind of booked it through this area. Sadly, one thing I can't book it through is this fight with Mikolash. I mean, I can still cheese him as much as physically possible because, well, screw this fight. As long as I have a weapon that allows me to, I'll pretty much always cheese him wherever possible. With Mikolash defeated, we can drop the brain and grab the first blood rock of the run. The route after this allows us to easily cheese this Intelligencer guy, which is good because I hate him. Back in the Hunter's Dream, we level up Vitality by 2 points and get the Evelyn to plus 10 with the Blood Rock. So that just leaves Murgo's Wet Nurse to finish off to complete the Nightmare of Mensis. She has a lot of health, but she's one of the bosses in this game that has no real way to deal with ranged attacks, and she moves very slowly. It was a pretty boring fight in all honesty, so we sort of just stood back and shot her a whole bunch of times. It was so uninteresting, calling her a dry nurse might be more appropriate. Anyway, she's dead. Alright, Vitality to 54 and Blood Tinge to 32. Let's grab some items from Cathedral Ward. Oh sweet, a new hat. Let's try it. Ah! We then have a jolly jog through the DLC. I did think about grabbing the Gatling gun while here, but it would have needed too much strength investment which I wasn't willing to grind for. So instead, it's time for Ludwig. I actually did really well on the first attempt, but as I am apparently prone to do, I choked at the last moment. Time to stop horsing around. You ever do really well on the first attempt of the boss, choke, and then the second attempt is just so much worse? Well, that happened here. I took way too many hits in the first phase this time, using over half my blood vial stock, but at least I managed to break his legs for more damage. The second phase was close also. I actually saved all bone marrow ash for this to try and get through it as quick as possible. It's crazy that I still have such difficulty dodging his sword swipes after all this time. I nearly died, but thankfully I just about got through. Know what kind of house this guy would have in the North Pole? A Ludwiglu. We now upgrade Blood Tinge and Vitality, and hey, guess what? Despite doing this almost every time, I forgot to grab the eye pendant yet again. Not sure why I always turn a blind eye to this. Anyway, we get it and use it to go up to the research hall. But of course, we go back down to get Laurence's skull. Shall we just try him now? Damage is low compared to his huge health, but also he can somehow one-shot me from almost full health if I dodge wrong. This is going to be fun in future cycles, I can just tell. The winning attempt took nearly 10 minutes, and it took almost every bullet I had. Similar to Ludwig, I took too many hits in the first phase. Maybe I'm just bad at it, but I feel like his hitboxes are a bit stinky sometimes. I saved all but one bone marrow ash for the final phase, and to be honest I kinda wonder if that was a mistake. The final phase is actually a lot easier to cope with as he can't close the distance as fast and his attacks are easier to avoid, so maybe it would have made sense to blast through that first more annoying phase with the bone marrow ash. Regardless though, many bullets later, Vikarma catches up with Laurence and he dies. Well, let's enter the research hall. As always, we have lots of fun. Yep, lots of fun. Even this hunter doesn't want to be here. Now, it's important that we get some brain fluid. We of course give the brain fluid to Saint Adeline and we'll come back to see her later. But first up, we gotta take care of this army of me in my 20s. With range, this is a pretty easy fight, but long due to how much health these guys have. It took a lot of bullets, but their short-range melee attacks and slow-moving projectiles are all trivial to avoid, so this doesn't trouble us too much. After the whole Laurence thing, I thought it prudent to level up Vitality to hopefully help with the coming bosses. We can now give more brain fluid to Adeline. After which, we take her own brain fluid and feed it to her or something, which rewards us with the milkweed rune. This will be important in a little while. But first, we gotta wake up Lady Maria. So, weirdly, this can be one of the harder bosses. She moves around a lot and actually can dodge bullets. But then I realised you can parry bait her a lot, which is how I won in the end. Basically, just get close to her and fire as she starts to attack, giving you a pretty good chance to parry her and then land a stronger follow-up hit. Landing the parry with a bone marrow ash obviously gives the best damage, so I saved this for the second phase and beyond. The parry bait strategy works through all her phases, except when you randomly get set on fire by nothing. Not sure what that's about, but in any case, a few more bullets send this Marie-animated corpse back to the afterlife. Remember the milkweed rune from earlier? Well, by putting this rune on, we can get the accursed brew hunter's tool from the rambling villager near the start of the hamlet. This is one of 2 hunter's tools I plan to take through to the start of New Game Plus with me. I'm taking this as normally you only get it right near the end of the game, and the other one is the Black Sky Eye, which has the lowest arcane requirement of any hunter's tool. We next speedrun through the fishing hamlet, and of course you know what's coming next. It's orphan time. Ow. Double ow. As expected, this was a tough fight. I actually found out the wind-up swing is parryable, which helped a lot with phase 1 to get extra damage in. As with the previous bosses, I saved my bone marrow ash for phase 2. I didn't even bother trying to parry here, I found his attacks too hectic to read, and instead opted to just take my time and whittle his health down with bullets from a distance. This was pretty slow honestly, it was a 10-minute fight again, and half that time was dedicated to taking off the last quarter of his health. It was a real battle of attrition, and the cost of bullets was a constant worry. The last thing I wanted was to run out of ammo at the last moment, but thankfully we did indeed have just enough bullets to finish him off. We shoot up the Dark Shadow to get the Nightmare Slain text, and then use his blood echoes to put a couple points into Arcane. But you might notice there's one boss I still haven't done. Martyr Legarias. So, real talk, I had thought this was going to be one of the toughest fights of the whole run due to his bullet deflecting shield in the second phase, but actually you can shoot him when he runs at you for fairly consistent hits. Our damage is also way better than I expected, but I think that's because I was confusing his arcane resistance to his blood tinge resistance. With some timely shooting, we bring down this martyritating boss on our first try. We then leveled up to 16 arcane, which is the minimum needed to use hunter's tools at the start of the next cycle. We also consume the umbilical cords in preparation for the final boss. So normally, Gehrman feels pretty easy after you've just done the DLC bosses, but it would appear I underestimated him. He was much tougher than expected. I mean, the first parts of the fight you can get away with just shooting wildly, but his blue hyper armor aura phase is much more tricky with his ability to close the distance very quickly. We still brought him down in the end just by shooting loads and praying we didn't die, dodging his Gehrmanic attacks, and finally pulling out the win. We of course hunters marked out for Moon Presence as we're low on ammo now. But once we're back in, Moon Presence is of course really easy. Towards the end, I literally just stood there spamming the shoot button until he died. Luckily, I had enough ammunition to finish it. Just to mention, if you're enjoying the video, why not consider subscribing? Many watching aren't, and we're working our way to 200k. There'll be more jokes and probably more pain for me. Thank you all, I appreciate ya. Well, it's time for a new cycle, and that means time for some new drip. The Black Sky Eye is our starting weapon as it has the lowest arcane requirement. I'm curious what the damage will look like from it. It shoots out a small meteor at our foes and it does not very much at all. I think we best try and change that. Let's get back to the Hunter's Dream. We use the echoes from the final boss to get more arcane points to hopefully boost our damage. It still takes 3 shots to kill a basic enemy. This is gonna be rough. Outside of the Accursed Brew and the Black Sky Eye, every other Hunter's tool must be grabbed at the point you would normally acquire them in the game. This means, as there's no tools here and we don't need upgrade materials, we can just book it through early Yharnam. One interesting thing to note, the flaming boulder on the bridge now doesn't do enough damage to kill the townsfolk thanks to their buffed health in New Game Plus. And speaking of buffed health in New Game Plus, so real talk, one of the reasons I put off doing this run for so long is because of the health increase bosses get in New Game Plus in this game. Father Gascoigne now has 12,343 health. You heard that right, he goes from 2,031 to 12,343, meaning his health number is multiplied by 6. That is an absolutely insane increase, and because most of the builds I want to use rely on ammo, at some point we might not be able to do enough damage before running out. As you probably expect, we do not do very much damage, but at least the first phase is okay and so we can stagger him just by spamming our attack. Phase 2 is of course way harder, as he no longer staggers, does huge damage to us, and punishes very quickly. We can do slightly more damage when he's falling or jumping, but it's pretty negligible. It's also worth noting that having a ranged build doesn't help too much here because of the awkward shaped arena, meaning it's hard to keep any kind of consistent distance from him given how fast he can close the gap. But overall, the main strategy was just keep running away and firing, and after about 1 million shots, he finally went down. We're going to need something with damage that's a bit meatier than this eyeball if we want to get through this. Past his arena, we find that a Kin Cold Blood replaces the gem workshop we'd normally get, and then we light the Cathedral Ward lamp and return to the dream. I decided to take a different route, so I used a poppable soul to buy the Hunter Chief emblem and open this gate. We take the quote-unquote normal route to open the gate to Vicar Amelia, but struggle to kill a dog, which is probably a bad sign. I first decided to head to Hemwick Charnel Lane. I wanted to try to level Arcane up more before we do Amelia. I foolishly thought the witches would be easier. We do tiny damage to the witches, but what's even worse is, according to the Hem Wiki, they now have 11,846 health each, meaning that because there's 2 of them, they have a combined total of almost 24,000 health, which is actually the 3rd highest health in the base game in New Game Plus. We actually cannot do enough damage, so there's only one thing for it. We need to go and level grind. So after a disgusting level grind, I got up to 40 arcane and allow myself to use Accursed Brew. As I mentioned earlier, it normally comes very late in the game to be helpful. Shout out to Lemon and his run using this weapon a couple months back. So this feels weird to say, but let's try Vicar Amelia instead, as she somehow technically has less health, even though she's got more than 4 times the amount of health she did in New Game. Damage wise, this is possible. We do 405 damage, but we can do more if we hit her as she jumps or hit a broken body part, although it's not always easy to do. Sometimes the brew does less because it's only the shockwave that hits her. At least, I think that's what's happening. I'm going to allow myself to use Numbing Mist because her being able to heal might just make this impossible. Saying that, we did run out of Numbing Mist and I was worried that she'd Ahelia again, but I kept the pressure on, and with no bullets and 2 vials remaining, she is defeated. This is starting to feel a bit more possible. We now level up to 42 arcane, touch the skull, and head to the Forbidden Woods again. Our focus now should be getting more Hunter's tools, so we run through to unlock the route up to Yharnam, and of course grab the Cainhurst summons. We take the other route now, and we see that normal enemies also get pretty big health boosts, as it now takes 3 brews to kill a normal enemy. In any case, we unlock the shortcut, and then proceed to piss off Voltaire. With him aggroed, we go down the lift and he vaults down to his death. We do the same to the hunter that spawns in his place and get rewarded with the hunter's tool, Madaras Whistle. This tool is unique in that its damage actually scales with blood tinge, although it still does arcane damage. It's pretty weird because it summons a snake below me, but it can hurt me as well as enemies, so I gotta get out the way quick. This seems very awkward, and it also costs twice as many bullets to use as Accursed Brew, so I'm not sure how useful this will be. For now, we level up 2 more points into Arcane. We might as well head downwards and make our way into Old Yharnam. We didn't really need to kill him, but I still decided to eyeball blast Jura off the edge. He didn't see that one coming. Shame he's not a bit more durable or he might have survived. Well, might as well try the Blood-Starved Beast. I thought I'd at least try Madaras Whistle, but yeah, it's in no way worth it for the tiny amount of additional damage it does versus Accursed Brew, and it's very difficult to even land it. So instead, we used Accursed Brew, and this was okay. It was easier than Vicar Amelia, which is probably unsurprising. We did get poisoned a few times, but otherwise, we just kept our distance and force-fed this beast our concoction. This was a real brute force victory. Now, we level up to 45 Arcane and spend all our insight for probably obvious reasons. We still need to do the witches, and I'm hoping our leveling up will mean this is now possible. I spent all the insight to get rid of their summons to make this as painless as possible. The witches take 538 damage from Accursed Brew. This was an easy fight now, we had the damage and beat them with no issues. Shame we couldn't give them some sand witches to go with their brew. With our arcane stat now at 47, it's time to find another hunter's tool, so we head to Cainhurst where we speed on through. After making this jump, we can open this chest to get the executioner's gloves. This tool fires 3 skulls which home in on the opponent, doing decent damage and only costs 1 extra bullet compared to Accursed Brew, so this seems like it'll be useful. I always like to take different routes in the higher cycles, so this time we get the Tonsil Stone and then get grabbed by Amygdala, which takes us to the lecture building. Once we get the lecture theatre key, we can grab the Augur of Ebrietas, a hunter's tool that fires out tentacle attacks. So let's head to the Nightmare Frontier. Like most bosses, Amygdala gets a huge HP boost, but it's much less of an issue compared to the other bosses, as firstly it's weak to Arcane, and the head of course is a massive weak point. This was a great chance to use the Executioner's gloves, which do huge damage here homing in on the head. For once, there was no danger of running out of bullets, and after enough skulls to the face, the brain train was brought to a crashing halt. Once again, we get smacked by the Sackman to get to Yahar'gul early. There wasn't much I needed from here, but for some reason, I spent way too long trying to get these boars to kill this Sackman. If these guys are like the police here, this is kind of a pig-on-pig battle. So I went into Paarl thinking this was going to be super easy given his weakness to Arcane, but actually this was very annoying. Because he moves around a lot, the Executioner's gloves kept missing given their projectiles are quite slow. So we switched back to the trusty Accursed Brew for a little bit more reliability, but this was still a super messy fight. His electricity did huge damage and it was harder to hit the head than you'd think it would be. I was surprised I actually won. In hindsight, locking onto his head was a bad shout as he'd move it just as I'd go to throw. The final hit actually was from the shockwave of the brew that actually flew to the side of him because of his head moving. Felt like I was flailing around in the dark there, but hey, at least he's done. But now, it was time for one of the hardest bosses of the whole run, the Shadows of Yharnam. No, I'm not joking. These guys get an enormous health increase, and because there's 3 of them, it adds up to almost 32,000 health. Plus, they can dodge my Accursed Brew unfortunately. I tried the Executioner's gloves, but it just drained too many bullets, meaning I'd run out before I could win. Augur of Ebrietas can definitely get it done damage-wise, but it can be hard to hit them with it, and it does leave me very open to their attacks, which now do a lot more than in New Game. The Black Sky Eye is reasonably consistent with hitting them, but damage is too low to get the job done. So yeah, for this cycle at least, this was the most annoying fight by a large margin. After a lot of attacks, I finally managed to kill the sword one, but then they dodged relentlessly, causing me to miss loads, wasting vials and bullets, and I died after fighting them for 13 minutes. Okay, so we need to improve our setup, that much is clear. After doing some Chalice dungeon diving, we get the Communion rune for 5 extra blood vials. This is effectively 25 more bullets compared to 4 from the Odin rune, whatever, so it seems like a sensible trade-off. With this, I did better but still died after nearly 14 minutes. I think I need to take out the Fireball guy first for once. So next time, I did take out the Fireball guy first, but it didn't seem to help much. The one good thing I learned is that a Cursed Brew can hit multiple shadows, which might be the only way I can win. After a few more painful and drawn out deaths on my part, I finally did it. The winning attempt was an 18-minute fight. First, I used the brew to hit multiple shadows by running behind the fireball guy and then throwing when the others were near until he dies eventually. I ended up having to use Adeline's blood and Yosefka's blood vial to ensure I had enough health and bullets. Then, I tried to do the same with the remaining two. The best opportunity I found was by baiting the candle shadow to breathe fire and then throw the brew when the sword one ran up behind him. With just the sword shadow left and not many vials remaining, I switched to the Augur of Ebrietas. I was so scared I was going to choke after all this, but I somehow kept my cool and landed the last few tentacle blasts to end this one, the shadow of this fight looming over the run no longer. With that, we level up to 52 arcane. As a whole, I would say Rom was less annoying, but still pretty tricky due to the spider gank and how much damage they do now. But the worst part of this by far was that unfortunately my recording software actually somehow didn't capture the winning fight, but it was mainly me running around and throwing brews at Rom, so I promise you didn't miss much. With the blood moon rising once again, we enter Yahar'gul. Here we just run through and grab the upper cathedral ward key and also the tiny tonitress. This fires some lightning, but it's not really cost effective at 6 bullets a shot. So to complete our hunter's tool setup, we go to upper cathedral ward. Here we easily kill the octopus men with executioner's gloves with no issues whatsoever. Damn it. Anyway, we get the main gates open. Celestial Emissary was pretty easy. A Cursed Brew for phase 1 for splash damage to hit multiple boys, and then Executioner's Gloves for phase 2. It's easy to shoot him from a distance with these as he towers over the others. Well, sorry about your bad luck, blue lad. Beyond them, we get Call Beyond, probably the most powerful hunter's tool, but costs 7 bullets to fire. I could have used this for Ebrietas, but I opted for the Executioner's Gloves instead for more consistent hits on the head. This did massive damage to her. I only died on the first attempt due to getting trapped in this camera nightmare. Annoyingly, I then had a second death where she hit me with the charge and then used it again immediately while I was trapped in a corner. I'm not sure what I could have done to escape that. On the third try, there was no BS and we absolutely smashed her, spamming the gauntlets at some parts to demolish her health. We actually killed her as she was charging, making the Kos most of our opportunity and pulling out the win. With Arcane up to 55, it's time to take on this pile of Yahar'gul, the One Reborn. This thing has huge arcane resistance, so nothing was doing too much damage. Thankfully, he doesn't get too much more health, only just under double of what he normally has. Yeah. Because it did the most damage against our large foe, I ended up spamming as many Call Beyonds as I could until I had no more bullets remaining, including using the ones lying in the arena. Then I used the Accursed Brews with blood bullets to finish the job. I remembered at this point that I actually hadn't done Cleric Beast. He has over 18,000 health now, which might be the most insane increase yet, given he could very well be the first boss you face, but luckily for us at least, this didn't matter too much given our damage now. Call Beyond could take off over 2,000 health or more if cast from the right distance, and of course he has extra bullets lying around in his arena. This would have been really annoying if we'd had to do this at the start of the cycle, but we smashed through him with our somewhat cheesy damage. I guess you could call this Clericotta. With that attended to, we enter the Nightmare of Mensis. I tried to push the Intelligencer off the ledge by this lift, but he wouldn't go due to an invisible wall, so we just stun locked him in the corner instead. And speaking of cheesy stun locking, we similarly cheesed Mikolash because it's Mikolash and he is trash. Arcane is now looking nice at 61. I grabbed the Blood Rock even though I didn't need it, but it might come in handy next cycle. To be honest, the Wet Nurse was a Murgona before the fight even began. She is weak to Arcane, and Call Beyond just destroyed her easily, despite a slightly larger health pool. This one reminded me that we need to get the other umbilical cord still. Let's get the one from Yosefka first. Hey Yosefka, catch! We then grab the umbilical cord from the abandoned workshop, and then crush the cords in our hand as is tradition. So, on to Gehrman. Given that he is an NPC type opponent, I worried about him dodging our attacks like the Shadows did, and I was right to be worried. Firstly, Call Beyond did not do enough consistent damage given he's a small target, and as expected, he did indeed dodge the Accursed Brews. But thankfully, he doesn't get too big of an increase in his health. so I didn't need to be as concerned about using bullets, so Executioner's Gloves were a viable option to use here. These actually made the fight pretty easy, he just kept walking into them and it didn't trigger him to dodge for whatever reason. Felt slightly cheap, but all's fair in glove and war, as they say. Moon Presence comes, but we of course Hunter's Mark out so we can do the DLC and Legarias first. So let's do Martyr Legarias. He actually has much lower health than many of the other bosses we've been fighting, but this is offset by him having super high arcane resistance. We do very little damage and he likes to spam the sword attack, making me waste bullets destroying it. For phase 1 I used a Cursed Brew, and then as he starts his phase transition I used the Augur to stun him out of the phase 2 buff. I would use the Brew to blast him and his sword when he summoned those, but otherwise use the Augur to get attacks in after he did his flying attacks to stagger him. I actually finished him off with the Executioner's Gloves to just give him a taste of his own medicine. Took about 10 minutes, but we got him done. I was kinda surprised because this was only my second attempt. I had thought this guy would be a huge roadblock, but perhaps I overestimated him. Need to stop putting this guy so high on my martyr list. In a move I should have done last cycle, I put on the crown to dispel the illusion and then grab the unopened summons. We give this to Sir Laufred, who proceeds to turn the queen from vial blood into a pile of blood. This leads us to find Sir Laufred dead, but does let us get the Radiance rune, which gives 2% more healing from blood vials. If that doesn't sound like very much, it's because it isn't, but it could help to some degree. For now though, let's enter the DLC. You'll be pleased to know this time I did indeed remember to grab the eye pendant. So, fun fact here, the first time I ever fought Ludwig was on New Game Plus. That was nearly 10 years ago now. I remember it being really savage, so let's see how this goes. Ow. Ow. Okay, yep, still pretty solid. At this point, I realised that having 37 vitality was probably a tad on the low side, so grinded to get this to 45. Even with that though, this was still tough. Ludwig has 26,000 health in New Game Plus, which for some reason means he actually has more health than Orphan of Kos in New Game Plus. For the first phase, I swapped between a Cursed Brew and Executioner's Gloves. This wasn't so bad as he can't handle range all that well, I find. His arcane defense is double in phase 2, making this a bit trickier. I stuck with just using a Cursed Brew for the most part here. Thanks to that arcane defense buff, it seemed to take ages to bring his health down. At the end, I actually tried to spam the brew to finish him off, but we just couldn't quite get him. I had no vials left, and we actually traded, hitting each other at the same time and killing each other. Did that count? Please tell me that counted. Thankfully it did. Whew. There would have been a lot of angry discourse from me if it hadn't. Next, we ram the pendant into the skull again and get Laurence's skull for later. I'm really not looking forward to that one. Here's a surprise, the research hall is even more fun in New Game Plus. Thankfully, we do get a bit of a reprieve boss-wise. The living failures were pretty easy. Much like the Shadows of Yharnam, hitting multiple failures with the Accursed Brew saved the day, but honestly it was much easier to group these guys together due to their slow movement. After enough brews, these guys have liver failure and die shortly after. Right after, of course, we have Lady Maria. Similar to Gehrman, the Executioner's Gloves bully her in phase 1, it was pretty easy to bring her health down. In the latter phases though, she seemed to realise what was going on and started dodging the skulls more easily. So I switched back to the brew and just threw it at her when she's about to attack so she wasn't able to dodge. Probably a bit tougher than in New Game, but honestly not much. I was able to astrally my spirit and bring her down. We go for another jolly jog through the fishing hamlet and then kill Brew with our Accursed Braidor. I decided to take on Laurence at this point. The first thing to note is his damage is pretty massive here, taking me out from about 80% health with his lunge. The second thing to note is his absolutely insane health increase. I know I've said that a lot here, but just look at these numbers. I was expecting this to be hell, but Call Beyond actually was great here, able to do huge damage as long as I cast it from the right distance. I baited the big left arm slam and dodged back to get to what was usually the appropriate distance. Once I didn't have enough normal bullets left, I switched to using the Executioner's Gloves and a Cursed Brew to use up the 5 blood bullets I could create. I was worried I would run out of bullets or die due to his huge damage, but thankfully I had just enough to get the job done and finish him off as he crawled around. If you thought that was a little underwhelming, just wait until the next cycle. The Vicarnage has only just begun. We now get up to 69 arcane for the Orphan. Wait, what? So let's talk about Orphan. Nearly 26,000 health, very high arcane resistance. First attempt went way better than I imagined though. I mainly stuck with Accursed Brew for cost efficiency. Phase 2 was the biggest issue, trying to actually find time to attack, that is. Our damage was pretty low overall, and the fight took ages just to get to that point. One thing to note is that arcane scaling with Hunter's tools goes all the way up to 99, so I decided to grind up to 80 to see the difference, as we just really need as much damage as possible here. These 11 levels added about 40 damage per brew, not a huge amount, and phase 2 was just so difficult to find openings to throw where you don't get punished. So at this point, given this might be my only opportunity to do this, I was kinda curious to see what 99 arcane damage would look like on the tools, so I grinded a lot more, don't ask how, finally got up to 99 arcane. This gave me about 100 points more damage per Accursed Brew. Again, it's not huge, but it did at least help to get through the first phase quicker. In phase 2, after the numerous deaths preceding this, I started to finally find more openings to hit him, like after the jumps and when he stopped to do the back and forth slams. I think he played kinda nicely for me here, as he did quite a few of these attacks towards the end of the fight. It was by no means easy still, and it did come down to the wire with vials and bullets. Finally, one last brew prevented this creature from accosting me further. We of course brew up his spirit as well. Before doing the final boss, I went and grabbed all the weapons I could and then upgraded all of them to +6. As for the moon presence, we absolutely annihilated it with Cool Beyond so fast that it was pretty hilarious. Shame that this boss doesn't have an immunity to arcane damage. It's also kinda a shame we have to do the same ending for Bloodborne every cycle, as otherwise we don't get to fight all the bosses. Oh well. With the final cycle starting, we changed to some new drip. Next, I level up to minimal stats needed for most weapons. I won't level my stats beyond this for the sake of challenge, but will allow myself to use viscerals as I never normally use them in any run, so might be fun. First weapon on the roulette is the Threaded Cane. I added some random gems to it that I'd picked up on my journey, but I was only using generic ones found in the base game. I'm not going to do Chalice Dungeon diving or Winter Lantern farming for stronger ones. So, for a change, let's do the Cleric Beast first. I tried with Fire Paper also to help with the huge health pool. The range, especially in whip form, is pretty good. The damage wasn't incredible, but with enough hits we got some good numbers, managed to break limbs, and stagger a few times. The transform combo was useful, but the whip mode was my main go-to here just because I enjoyed the range. I normally write this weapon off, but you know what, it was pretty good here. It's just a shame we got it now, and we couldn't save it for Castle Cainhurst. My guy Akane is also a big fan of this weapon. Okay, that's enough of that, Cleric Beast is dead. Next weapon is Ludwig's Holy Blade. Strong choice. So I guess we're using this for Father Gascoigne. The first attempt went really well, until Beast Father said no at least. The second attempt was much better. My favourite attack of this weapon is the charged R2 poke, very reminiscent of the attack from Great Swords in Dark Souls 3, but I found out the follow-up R2 to this actually pancakes Gascoigne, which is great. It even works in phase 2, and the damage was pretty good. Fire Paper helps to bring him down quicker, but still took a lot of hits. We pierced him a lot with these charged pokes, which, much like this weapon, left Gascoigne quite holy. We enter Cathedral Ward, and our next weapon is the Burial Blade. We head straight for Old Yharnam this time, and smash Jura off the edge first try. Definitely first try. Anyway, onto the Bloodstarved Beast. This was a much longer fight than the previous couple. Luckily, I did bring antidotes with me. I alternated between transform attacks and the charged R2s, which have a great reach and can send the beast flying. Damage felt pretty low here, but that's to be expected given it's a +6 weapon. Probably should think about improving that, but despite that low damage, this weapon is awesome and probably one of my favourites in the game. Anyway, after a 9-minute fight, we finally give this beast a proper burial. The next weapon up is Amygdala Arm. For the third time, I decided to go to Yahar'gul early. I actually wanted to use this weapon for Paarl, given it does some arcane damage. Then I remembered that he resists blunt damage, so the transform state is better for its slashes. But this didn't feel like the best weapon for him, especially when we can't break his limbs with it. The camera was also super messy, so I decided to take this weapon elsewhere for now. For a brief detour, let's get that umbilical cord and make our way to... well, damn. It had become clear already that +6 won't do great here in New Game ++. Who could have predicted that? Well, thankfully we have some bloodstone chunks stored up, so I get the arm up to +9. Now, let's try Vicar Amelia. I was done messing about given the high health of the bosses here, so I used some beast blood pellets in conjunction with transform attacks. This finally showed me some good damage numbers this cycle. I mean, I took hard hits too, but the arm was able to break her limbs and stagger her a few times. This felt more like it. I consider this fight a real call to arms for this run. Next weapon is the Reiter Palash. I felt about as confident using this weapon as I did actually pronouncing its name correctly, so let's use it on the witches. We bold Hunter's Mark out and spend Insight. This should be super easy now, except when you get trapped and two-shot by the AoE. This time, I did the charged R2 loop on both of them, because they deserve a thorough Reiter Palash kicking. This took a while due to their massive HP increases, but still an easy fight. Next weapon, my first love, the Kirkhammer. We take in one last round of Master Willem's blood nonsense and run through the Forbidden Woods to unlock the shortcut to Yharnam, get the Cainhurst summons, yada yada yada. Back in the woods, I actually died by falling down this pit for the first time in years. Well. Given how things went last cycle, I was more than moderately worried about the Shadows of Yharnam. As expected, we do low damage to them, and they do huge damage to me. At this point, I decided we need weapons higher than +6 for this. So after some horrendous Chalice dungeon grinding, I got all the weapons to +9 instead. Even with a more upgraded weapon, this was still painful. I could easily get 2 hit by these guys. Crazy how much harder this fight becomes in the New Game Plus cycles. This again was one of the harder fights of the run. I actually mainly used the sword form, which I know is sacrilege, but getting in the fast hits was way more beneficial here. I used a combo of bolt paper and beast blood pellets to speed up the process. Initially, before they transform, I stuck with being really aggressive to the fireball guy until he died. The next section was much more annoying and slow, as I whittled down the sword guy, the one with the most health of any of them. It was again a lot of running with some close calls. With that one finally dead, the last part was pretty trivial as you can stun lock them if it's one-on-one. I switched to the hammer just to get some use out of it, but actually nearly died from my hubris. I survived thankfully, and shortly after we hammer the final nail into this boss fight's coffin. I'm glad I don't have to do this again. So we spin the roulette wheel again to get the Tonitrus. I think this might actually be great for Rom, you know. Tonitrus did indeed murder Rom. Just because I could, I actually took the time to kill all the spiders for once, and this was easier than I had imagined. By pressing L1 with the Tonitrus, you give it an extra lightning buff, and Rom is super weak to lightning. Easy enough to mow her down without the minions. I should put my Tonitrust into this weapon more often. The next weapon is the classic Saw Cleaver. Instead of messing around in Yahar'gul, I grabbed the Upper Cathedral ward key right away. It turns out the octopus men have really leveled up here. Ouch. This time, I actually ran to unlock this shortcut door to make taking these guys out easier. With a bit of luck and bolt paper, we got it done. So you probably think that using the Saw Cleaver on the Celestial Emissary is kind of a waste, and yeah, that's probably right. It did get a bit hairy just because of their damage, and I did nearly die at one point, but a combo of bolt paper and beast blood pellets with the Saw Cleaver's excellent transform combos made quick work of them. They never even saw it coming. The roulette next chooses the Holy Moonlight Sword. That's actually perfect for Ebrietas. This time, I set up the sword with gems to buff arcane damage as Ebrietas is weak to it. Given that I did already beat the whole game with just the moonlight projectiles of this sword, I knew that this wouldn't be too bad. I charged up and blasted her in the face multiple times, doing over 1,000 damage a pop. This combined with some close-up charges on the head when she staggers and when she does the face transition meant that this was done pretty fast, even on New Game Plus Plus. The arcane stat from the previous cycle obviously helped, and just as quick as it began, my time moonlighting as Ludwig was over. Next weapon up is the Kos Parasite. Yay! Well, you know what that means. Broccoli time again. I realised I hadn't yet gone back to do Paarl yet, so now seemed like a good time. I mainly used the L2, aka the Oxplosion. My strat was to get underneath him and just blast, dealing over 1,000 damage each time, and quickly finishing this one after the annoyance fighting him earlier was. I feel like this was the perfect weapon for this, plus it's always fun to wear my vegetable themed costume. Next up, the wheel says, Beast Hunter Scythe. Time for the One Reborn. Good news, the damage is great, and this weapon's transform combo is awesome. Bad news, he can eradicate our health in seconds. Next try though, we absolutely decimated him. When you get the stagger and then unleash a transform combo on the main body with bolt paper and a beast blood pellet, the damage numbers go pretty wild. Even with its much higher health than New Game, we shred through it. I love the way the combo of this weapon makes you go back and forth. Great weapon, would recommend. Happy scythe, happy life, as they say. So the Shikage is our next weapon. It felt weirdly appropriate to take it to Castle Cainhurst for Legarias, given this is a vile blood weapon. So let's take him on. I really wanted to use the transform combo here, but he seemed to interrupt it every time, so I stuck to single R1 attacks, making sure to do a charged heavy as he started to do the phase 2 buff. Landing the charged heavy does knock him down, but I didn't find too many opportunities to use it. Overall, this was a more fun fight than the last couple cycles, a good chance to flex my Shikar gaming skill. And the wheel says, Rifle Spear. This is one weapon I really don't feel confident with. We head to the lecture building and kill Patches for reasons, before we head to Nightmare of Mensis for Mikolash. Here's a quick clip to demonstrate why I hate fighting Mikolash normally. What could I have actually done to prevent that? This fight was pretty annoying. I couldn't find a way to do my usual cheese tactics, so I did in fact fight him normally. The damage of this weapon is honestly horrible. Even at +9 with some OK gems attached, we were barely getting any damage. What's even more weird is he's supposedly weak to pierce damage, so why is this so bad even with a beast blood pellet? Anyway, after many minutes of poking in phase 1 and 2, he's finally dead. This weapon would only be good if you got a number of them and built them into a tall structure. You know, a rifle tower. So the Beast Cutter is up next. I actually remembered to grab a gem in Murgo's loft I forgot about before leaving the area because it's DLC time, baby. I wanted to use the Beast Cutter for Ludwig as we get a damage bonus against him given he is a beast and the Beast Cutter does serrated damage. I did try the transformation attacks, and while the damage was indeed good, they were pretty slow for this weapon, and often just spamming R1 in the untransformed state did comparable damage with less risk. Aggression was the name of the game as I was unrelenting through phase 1. Phase 2 is just a matter of sticking as close to him as possible as his attacks are easier to avoid this way and there's more chances to attack, but you still need to be careful as death can come swiftly. In the closing moments, I went for it and landed the finishing visceral to end it. He didn't seem to enjoy the cutter of our jib. Next weapon is the Boom Hammer. We use this for the living failures. Pretty straightforward strat. Add the boom with L1, charged R2, run away, repeat over and over until dead. Boom, 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 until they meet their doom. Next weapon is the Church Pick. Guess we're using this for Lady Maria. This was actually a tougher fight with her. I tried the transformed state and combos, but they seemed too slow and she kept punishing me. I preferred using the untransformed state, which let me chain stagger her sometimes, even in the latter phases. Bolt paper and beast blood pellets kept us going strong, and despite a usual near choke at the end of the fight, were able to pick up the win. This time, the roulette landed on the stake driver. There is absolutely no way I'm using this on either of the remaining DLC bosses, so I used it for Murgo's wet nurse instead. Okay, you know, to be fair, I've always thought of this weapon as extremely overrated. Any of those one-shot videos on YouTube make it look amazing, but I've never found it that good. To my surprise, I actually did see some decent damage from it. The charge-up attack is 100% not worth it though. You can do way more damage with just R1s. I did make sure to finish her with it though, just to add some high stakes to this fight. Next weapon is Whirligig Saw, my personal favourite. But what to use it on? Well, given it's serrated, Laurence makes the most sense. The L2 holds the saw in place, doing damage as long as you have stamina. Good damage for sure, but Laurence's damage is much better. Definitely the highest damage from a boss I've experienced yet. This would have been the same in New Game Plus, but I had range there so it was easier to avoid his attacks. I died a lot here. This was perhaps the hardest fight in the whole run, just for his ability to eviscerate my health in seconds. Sometimes, I even got one shot from full health, and I have 50 vitality now. I ended up upgrading the Whirligig Sword to +10 for extra damage. I'll be honest, because I got sick of dying and realised we hadn't fulfilled our quota of slightly cheesing a boss in the New Game Plus cycle, I decided to go for the single hit and run tactic for phase 1, just baiting the hand slam attack. This was pretty slow, but at least it was safe. In phase 2, I could afford to be more aggressive and used bolt paper with beast blood pellets. I used the L2 attack to soar into him several times. If he does the fire spit when you're close to him, it's like winning the lottery. I baited his swings and punished, and finally, after many hits, he went down at last. That absolutely sucked. and sort of felt like a waste of my favourite weapon. Maybe I'll have to give it a whirl elsewhere. Next weapon is Rakuyo. This should be good. This would be our weapon of choice for Orphan of Kos. I also upgraded stamina before this, as having it so low wasn't going to help much. This was a pretty tough fight, but honestly didn't feel as BS as Laurence did. Baiting the jump attacks in phase 1 works great, as you can position yourself behind him and use a charged attack to open him up for a visceral. Phase 2 was much tougher. I don't know if it's because it's New Game Plus or he normally does this, but sometimes in the second phase he would follow up normally safe attack windows with new moves. However, this might just be because a lot of my recent runs in this game haven't been melee, so maybe that's why. I found a jump attack that I could semi-reliably get behind him to also do a backstab plus visceral, which helped a lot. This was pretty down to the wire, and I might have died had it not been for Yosefka's blood vial. The run is almost Rakuyova. Almost. So the Sword Spear is our next weapon. We of course use it for Gehrman, and yeah, this was a really fun fight. The transform combos from the Sword Spear worked great and kept him stunned a lot through the first phase. When he gets the blue aura, he can now hyper armor through most of your attacks, but luckily there's still some windows to get a few hits in. The Sword Spear and Cleaver have awesome transform attacks, some of the fastest and best flowing in the game, which work great to bring him down, raising my spirits in the process. We hunters mark out for moon presents. Well, looks like we get to use the Bloodletter for moon presents. This was pretty okay, although I did get hit by an attack which prevented me from healing. I didn't even know it could do that. Otherwise though, we smack it with our big spiky stick over and over again until we finally complete this saga. So there it is, except I forgot Amygdala. Good thing I made a backup save. What weapon do we get? Simon's Bowblade? Hey, actually that could be kinda perfect. As expected, shooting Amygdala in the head from a distance is a great strat. There was a really weird moment where we staggered her and somehow grappling hooked into the visceral. I'm not sure what happened there, but I'm not complaining. I kinda wish the arena was a bit bigger sometimes, but that's okay. A few more shots to the head and Amy is dead. Now it really is Bova. I think it might be fair to say that Bloodborne does indeed have one of the hardest New Game Pluses of any of the Souls games, just judging on some of those crazy HP increases and also the damage boost that enemies get. This was a wild ride, and weirdly parts of the last cycle felt the most difficult, even though I was actually getting to use normal weapons, so yeah, crazy that. In any case, thanks for watching. I've been JK Leeds, have a good one, and see ya.